you're not crazy for wanting something more. And you're not ungrateful for questioning whether your current path still fits. You've grown, your priorities have shifted. The world isn't the same as it was 5, 10, or 20 years ago. So, yeah, it makes sense that your career might need to change also. But the second that that thought creeps in, fear is usually right behind it. It's too late. I'd have to start over. I can't afford to lose everything that I've built in this career. Let me stop you right there. Changing careers doesn't always mean starting from scratch. And it doesn't mean throwing away everything that you've built in your career. This episode is going to be about making a pivot with strategy, self-awareness, and confidence, no matter how long you've been in the game. We're going to talk about what is behind any fear that you might have and how to decide if a career change is right for you. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about helping ambitious professionals take control of their career with clarity and confidence. This season, we are talking through real career challenges, and this episode is for anyone that has been asking themselves, is it too late to change careers? This comes up a lot with my mid-career to late career clients who are really successful on paper, but are starting to feel unfulfilled or stuck or just ready for something else. And what makes career change feel so hard? I know a lot of us have thought about it at one point. Heck, I've made 2 really big career changes in my time, and it felt impossible when I was going through it. But here's what we're feeling. First, identity loss, which I wouldn't really think of as identity loss so much as an identity shift, but it feels like a loss at the time. This is who I am. I have a reputation here. How can I let all of this go? And you feel very connected to the work or the career that you have because it's become a part of your identity. There's this fear of regret that seeps in. I hear this most often with my more senior career clients. What if you leave and you hate it? That is the biggest question when it comes to any type of career shift or career change, but especially later in your career. You want to know that you're going to like the next thing, or you want to know that you're going to like the next company. And sometimes that's really hard to know up front. And so there is a big fear around regret there. This is a very old term, but I think this idea of the golden handcuffs. And this is a conversation that I have with most of my clients who I would say are probably over the age of 40. This idea of the money and the benefits. And a lot of times they're in a really either prominent position or the pay is really good and they don't want to give it up. And so they feel handcuffed to the position. So it's kind of an antiquated term, the golden handcuffs, but that is one thing that I find a lot of my clients, we have to talk through is the money and the benefits and if it's worth making a change with that. And so it makes it very hard when they're confronted with that reality. Imposter syndrome is huge. I find this more for my mid-career professionals because in some ways, even though they're confident in their career, there is still a little bit of, I don't know if I'm quite there yet. And so they feel this imposter syndrome making a big switch. And some switches are really big. Some people make massive career changes. They go from one path to something completely different. that creates an even bigger gap in terms of imposter syndrome. But some people make smaller changes like an industry or a function, and it doesn't feel as big of a change, but the imposter syndrome can still be there. A lot of times it sounds like I'm too old to start over. I hear that one a lot. Or you just feel behind. You feel like if you make this switch, you're going to have to take some steps back, or you just don't have the skill set to feel confident. And so it creates that imposter syndrome. Something else that comes up for a lot of clients that makes this so hard is this idea of wasted time. And so there's a fear that we have. And if you haven't figured it out, fear is really what holds us back from making these big changes in our career. But this idea of wasted time, because maybe you have spent 10, 15, I don't even want to say 10, I want to say 15 to 20 years building a career in a specific, industry or in a specific function. And now you want to make a switch and you feel like, well, did I waste all of that time? Right. So these are some of the things that really can hit us hard because we're questioning and that fear creeps in. And we're going to use the control your career process to break this down even more. But one of the key concepts I want to get across for this episode is that if you are or want to make a career pivot, you are not erasing the past. You are not erasing all the work that you've done, the 10 to 20 years or more of experience that you have that got you here. You are going to take all of that with you into the next path, whether that's a complete 180 or it's just a little switch of something here or there. So don't think that you are really completely starting over. You're bringing a lot to the table, even if there is some reskilling or skilling that has to be done in order for you to make this switch. When I'm talking about big pivots, I'm talking about I was in marketing for 15 years and now I want to be a nurse. That's a really big pivot. It doesn't mean that you're not going to bring skills from your marketing experience into nursing, but nursing requires a really focused set of skills that you're going to have. So those are the bigger jumps that can make us feel like, the imposter syndrome comes up and all of that, but you were still a professional for 15 years. So you're still bringing that to the table with you. It's just going to look a little bit different. All right, so let's step into the control your career process. And for something like making a career switch, especially later in your career timeline, I love using the control your career process for this. I feel like this is one of those scenarios that this process just works so cleanly with. There are others that, I can make anything work with this, but any career situation work with this. But this is one that I feel really just accentuates what this is about and why I created it. So starting with stage 1, which is realistic reality, this is understanding what is happening right now. What is true about what is happening? And when we are talking about making any kind of pivot, especially a big one, especially one that feels like we might be starting over in our career, we have to be very, very, very honest with ourselves. And we have to have some really hard conversations. My clients that are going through this generally will use my career advancement intensive to help process through this, because we just work through so many different aspects of their past, present, and future when it comes to that particular offer. But it allows us to dig really deep into realistic reality, which is what we have to do here. So here are some things that I want you to think about. What are parts of your current position that you really like and that you really don't like? And I would actually emphasize we need to figure out what you don't like, because if you really don't like it and you're looking at a pivot that is going to do that thing, then we need to evaluate if that's going to be worth it for you. You know, can you align with other things that are going to offset the thing that you don't like? Also, we have to understand where your strengths lie. Now, that's getting a little bit into stage 2, but we have to be realistic about what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy to make sure that when we evaluate the new, path that you want to take, you understand where you might really enjoy it, but also where you might fall short. And then why do you want to make this move? Why this pivot? This is really a core question for me when I'm working with a client going through any kind of major career pivot, because I want to understand the breaking point. I want to understand the catalyst that got us here, the thing that made you go, I'm done. I need something different. And you might not have had that yet, but you can feel it coming. So you might be in a different stage with it, but you have to understand what's going on. Is it the environment? So maybe the culture of the organization. Is it something going on with leadership? Is it the workload? Is there a values misalignment? There are so many different things that for people who want to make a big switch, if it's one of those things, then sometimes I'm going to say, is this worth you making a really big pivot? Here's another caveat. A big pivot for someone who's been in an organization for over 10 years is going to feel like you're starting over completely. So you might be going into the same type of work. You might want to stay with the same function and even in the same industry, but you want to switch companies. That is the equivalent because you've been somewhere for so long, you've established yourself somewhere that it's really hard to see yourself somewhere else. So when we're talking about why you want to leave, I have to understand what is behind this. And is it something that you just have to work through in the current position? And this is actually a good position for you, but maybe you need some career management coaching to get through it. Or has there been some really big shifts and now you need to make some changes as well in order for you to get what you want out of your career? Because if you've been somewhere for over 10 years, even over 7 years in some cases, companies can shift and change. Your management can change. A lot can happen in that time, especially as we've gone through the pandemic and all of that. If you've had a position since before the pandemic, especially with it like a year or two before, you've seen companies go through these big shifts. And so that can really inform what's happening right now. But understand what your breaking point was, what the catalyst is for you wanting to make this move. And does it make sense, or is it something that you have to work on before you make a move? Think about timelines for this. So when we're thinking about making a move, and I advise all of my clients of this who especially have been somewhere for a very long time, if you are going to move out of your current position, it might not be the place you're going to land for the next 5 to 10 years. Your first position off of being somewhere for a long time could likely only be a couple years. And that's because you are making a big switch. You might not like it. It might not align. Something might happen. So my clients that really want longevity in an organization, I'm pushing back and saying, I think that's great. And if you find it, wonderful. However, we need to go into this understanding that you might not have longevity here. It might be a couple years. Because what happens then is you let things go. Oh, it'll get better. It's fine. And you talk yourself out of things because you want to hit some kind of imaginary number of years at an organization. And you can't think that way. Okay. And then we have to be really cognizant of our financial realities. I mentioned this earlier. You have to understand what you have currently and what you might have to leave. For some people, you can move up, you can move somewhere else, and it's fine. You're going to make the same or about the same. But for others, you might be taking a step back in salary or benefits or something like that. So you have to make that decision for yourself. I talk through that with clients because your financial reality, regardless of how much wealth you might have, most of us don't have a lot of that, but you have to be able to look at it objectively and understand, can I live on this regardless of where I'm at financially? Okay. And then also look at your personal realities. So when we're making a big switch, my clients who are in relationships, who have significant others, I always want them to have these conversations with that person because these are big decisions. These are big life decisions. And so I will ask them, what does your significant other say? How do they feel about it? And I really love my clients who come back and say, well, actually, they've been wanting me to leave for a while. So when you have support from a spouse or a significant other, I think that's a big sign to say, hey, maybe we do need to move on. And we just need to figure out what that looks like, for this next stage in your career. But there are other things outside of that. You have to look at, health concerns. And this is especially for my older clients, but not necessarily. We have a lot of chronic health issues that happen when we're very young, but you want to consider health and benefits. I have some clients that need specific benefits. And so they're only looking at companies that can provide certain benefits for them. Caregiving. This happens as our parents age, or sometimes children, we have just different responsibilities. And is the role that we have going to serve us for that? For example, I had a client who went through my career advancement intensive because they did want to make a change and they were trying to figure out what to do. Well, at the end of it, even though they were very motivated to find another position, they had some other things going on in terms of family and some other values that they realized, while this isn't the best situation for me career-wise, it works out in other ways that I really want to keep right now. And so I'm going to stay here for at least another couple of years. But here's what I'm going to work on over the next couple of years to help position me well for this transition that I know that I want. So that's a common conversation that I will have for people who do want to change, but they do have some values conflict with it. And we work through what that can look like. And so that's where breaking down your reality and understanding these parts of yourself and your situation is so helpful. And then I think this bigger question of, what about your current career situation specifically is making you question this position? Like, why do you want this big change? Because this doesn't just happen, right? Again, what's the catalyst? And so understanding what that is going to help you move forward with more clarity. Let's step into stage 2, identity analysis. So identity analysis is looking at who we are, looking at our personality and preferences that come along with that. When we're looking at making a big change, a lot of times I find there's something missing in terms of the preferences that someone has. And so we have to look at a lot of different aspects to understand what need is not being met. So some of that you might uncover in realistic reality. If not, we're going to go a little bit deeper into identity analysis, because a lot of times if we are really connected to a position, again, if you've been somewhere for a long time and you're making a switch, then our identity is wrapped up in the position. And so we have to understand, how is this going to impact us? And again, what's missing that we feel like we need to make a change? So we have our normal interests, skills, values that we want to go through, but I actually want to hone in on values for this particular one, because a lot of times what's happening is you have a value that's not being met, or a value that has been offended in some way. And we have to uncover what that is. And so I want to make sure that you understand your values. You can get my values assessment. I'll link it into the blog post for this episode. But really look at what those core values are, what you need as a professional to be successful, and what is butting up against that. I will tell you one thing that has been happening recently, and I think will continue to be an issue for a while, is RTO. So return to office. We had this amazing time where people were at home and working from home, and it was great. And now we have companies that are doing RTO. Now, that's going to shift again. I can guarantee you, we're in an employer market at the time of this recording. It will shift eventually to an employee market, and you will see work from home options come back. That's just going to be the ebb and flow of everything. But if you are somebody that really thrived working from home and now you're being forced to go back in to commute, to still sit at a desk and do Zoom calls with everybody, that might fight against, your values. And it might create additional stress because now you have to go back into the office, you have to commute, you have to do all these things that you didn't want to do anymore. And so that's one of the things that I want you to think about is what has changed, what has shifted that's really butting up against some of those values or those preferences that you have or have had that has shifted recently. Look at your personality in the culture as well. I find people that have been in an organization for a long time, sometimes the makeup or the culture of the organization can shift and they feel like they don't fit that anymore. And they're trying really hard. They're trying to adapt and change to it. And it's just not working. And so think about that for yourself. Have you outgrown this culture or this environment? And is that part of this shift that you want to make? And what do you want, right? So think about what is missing. So what is an ideal culture for you? What is an ideal environment for you so that you can look at organizations that really fit the bill for that? And then think about energy. I know we've talked about this on multiple episodes, but where are you getting your energy in your work? And again, is there a gap right now? Like maybe the work is boring, or again, there was a shift, right, in what the company is doing or where the company is headed, and you don't like that. I had a client a few years ago that had a really big values conflict that also ended up in like an energy conflict because the way the organization was going conflicted with their values, but then their work changed and their projects changed. And then that also conflicted with the type of work that they want to do. So they had a lot of change that happened really quickly, and they were able to use their network to thankfully get out of that situation and into an organization where there was a lot more alignment with the organization as a whole, but also the type of work that they were doing. So in this scenario of making a big switch, we have to understand who we are. We have to understand what we want out of work. And sometimes if this is a conversation you have not had in a long time because you've been somewhere for many, many years, this is actually a good opportunity to hire a coach. And this isn't me like plugging myself. Obviously, like I would love to work with you, but this is actually really where coaches come in handy, especially coaches like me, where I'm really good at helping people work out what is going on and what is going to be the best path forward for you. So if some of these things are hard for you to articulate, or you just don't know because you haven't thought about it, then a coach can be a really good option to help you kind of move through that process a little bit quicker. I think it's also important to remember that you have experience. You're good at the work that you're doing, and it's okay to want to make a shift. It's okay to want to do something different. I find my clients who have ADHD, they make shifts pretty consistently, but some don't. Some have had really good luck in one company making enough shifts that keep them engaged in the work. but now they're in a space where they really are trying to break out of what they're doing. And we have a lot of values conflicts and personality things, and there's a lot going on. And so it helps to talk through that as well. Okay, let's get into stage 3, which is our purpose-driven plan. This is establishing what your main goals are going to be for this issue. Now, as most of you know, I'm going to give you some examples of different goals, but your goal is going to be unique to you and your situation. So depending on what you've uncovered in stage 1 and 2 is going to impact what your goals look like in stage 3 and your actions for stage 4. So the overarching question that I want you to ask yourself in stage 3 is, what does a successful pivot look like to you? So what is the ideal situation? And the reason that I'm asking this is because most of you that are likely listening to this, you are employed, you have been somewhere for a while, and you have the luxury of taking some time to figure out what the most ideal scenario is and work toward that. If you have been let go, if you've been laid off, that's a little bit harder to do in this scenario. So I just want to be really honest about that. So what does success look like? What do you want it to be? I mentioned this earlier, but there's a total change, a total reinvention of your career where you completely swing another direction. Or there's just a little redirection. So maybe we just want to leave the company. We want to go to a different company, or we want to switch industries, or maybe we want to make a functional change, but not a drastic one. We just want to shift slightly. So understanding what that looks like, that's likely going to be the main goal after understanding what success looks like. Digging a little bit deeper between like reinvention and redirection. Are we making a shift in industry? Are we making a shift in the type of work? So the role that you're doing. Do you want to go into management? Do you want something that is more technical? Do you want to be an individual contributor? You know, what is the shift that we're talking about? Another shift to consider is the work setting. So many people are in corporate. Do you want to go to nonprofit? Are you in nonprofit and you want to go to corporate? Are you in a large organization and you want to go to a smaller organization, or vice versa? Whatever that looks like. So it's really understanding what you want right now, and then that goal is going to lead your actions. So again, what does success look like? And then we're going to build our goal off of that. All right, going into step 4, which is initiate action. This is going to be so key outside of realistic reality, which I think is at the top for this particular issue or challenge. Stage 4, initiate action, is probably the next thing, because when we're talking about any kind of shift and change in our career, especially one that we believe is going to be pretty big, we have to take action. And that action has to be informative. And that's where I would want you to start here. And remember, your actions are going to relate to whatever goal you choose, but likely your goal is going to be, I want a job in X, and then figure out whatever that is from there. So here are some actions to consider regardless of the goal that you choose. You want to talk to a number of people who are doing the work that you are considering doing. I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 if you can make it happen, just to get different perspectives. This is especially important if you are making some bigger changes. You want to talk to people that are in different size companies, different levels, different industries, things like that. If you have the ability to test the waters, that's also a great action to take. This can look different depending on what you're able to do. You could freelance, you can consult, you can volunteer. I think even going to a conference is really helpful to learn about whatever the pivot is that you want to take. If you get to a point where you know where you want to go, so maybe your goal is really specific, you know where you're headed, update your materials. So update your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn to link to the new thing. I find that that is one of the biggest gaps that I see with career changers is they're really not able to translate from one career path into another. That is sometimes where, hiring a coach can be helpful to help with that transition. I actually talk about career changing in my resume guide. So if that's something that you're interested in, it's on my website. But being able to make that translation is going to also help you when you get into interviews or if you are networking with people, because you'll understand what you need to say in order to bridge the gap between the two career paths. And then another action, and again, this is helpful once you have that goal of what you're looking for, but reverse engineer. Okay. So look at the goal that you have and then work your way back and say, hey, what skills do I have for this and where do I have gaps? Because if you have major gaps, then we might need to do some upskilling, some education before you make that move. And you have to understand what that is. And then that would go into the actions as well. And then another action that I want to share, but it's actually more related to habits. So I think I might save that for the habits section. But one thing to remember when we are taking action, especially with this, take small actions. You don't have to make a big change. What's going to happen is some of you are going to be like, I need a change, and you're going to just apply to everything. I don't recommend that, especially if you are in your mid to late career. We have to make intentional changes. Now, I know that some of you will say, oh, I applied on a whim and I got it. I love that. I love that for you. That is not true of most people. And so while I'm not saying that you can't do that, when you are making a bigger change later in your career where there is more at stake, you want to be as intentional as possible so that you are making an informed decision. All right. Okay, let's move into stage 5, which is high impact habits. I think what's cool about high impact habits for this is these are going to be like short-term habits. So these aren't going to be things that you need to keep for a really long time. You just need to put them together for the length of this transition if you do choose to make the transition. So the one that I wanted to share that's also connected to actions is development habits. And this is like learning new things. And so reading about the new path that you want to go down, taking some online courses, doing informational interviews. So anything that gives you more information and helps you develop for that new path, that's what you want to be doing. I think I love my weekly check-ins, okay? But when you're really in it, doing a check-in with yourself, maybe every other week, I don't think it has to be weekly, but maybe every other week saying, do I still want to do this? Am I still in it? Because sometimes what happens is we get triggered by something that happened in the workplace that makes us want to do something new. And that has now subsided. And we have to then be honest with ourselves and go, do I still actually want this? Or was this a reaction to something that happened that I didn't like? And now we have to make some different decisions, right? Definitely track your progress through this. Celebrate small wins, celebrate knowledge that you gain, celebrate talking to people, because these are all things that are going to help you take one more step forward toward the goal that you want, or it's just going to give you more clarity of whether or not this is the thing that you want to do. You might not want to do it once you gain more information. And then also find at least 1 or 2 people, could be a spouse, but could be somebody else that is a champion for this change, that really believes that you should make this change, and make sure that you're speaking with them regularly, and maybe set up like a regular conversation to say, hey, I'm looking at going through this. You've always been a huge champion. I'd love to just check in with you, and like kind of like an accountability partner just for this process, because what'll happen is you will start to doubt yourself through this, and you don't want to do that. And I don't want you to go through that. So having somebody that helps keep you going and motivates you externally for this change, I think is going to be really, really helpful. But also just understanding what support system you specifically need in order to keep going, because it's a lot to work your job and then also try to figure out this new path that you want to go down. So you definitely want that support. Okay, so let's say that you get to a point where you're like, I am not ready for this pivot. I think I want it, but I'm not ready. What can you do? Well, I want to harken back to the client that I talked about. That was something that happened with them specifically. And so what we did was we figured out what are the goals and actions for this time period that they set to help them move forward well and bridge some gaps, right? So here are some other things to think about depending on your situation. Can you make your current role more of what you want? So maybe you don't want to leave, but is there some kind of change you can make within the organization that's going to help you get more or just make you feel better in your position? Is there training that you can do, any kind of learning, exploration, networking that's going to take you to the next thing? I think that is key when you're not quite ready to leave the current position. Some companies offer a sabbatical-like situation so you can take a break. That is definitely something that I would recommend if you have the ability to do it, but I know that not everybody has the ability to do it. Just remember, whatever you choose during this time, it needs to be intentional. I think it's important to remember that you've already built a career that worked for you once, so you can do it again. But it also doesn't mean that that career is working for you now. So if you're wondering whether or not to make a change, we cannot start with fear. We can't start with those questions we asked ourselves early on in this episode. We have to start with clarity. We have to really break down what we are looking for. Remember, your past, it's not wasted. You learned a lot, and it's what qualifies you to actually make some of these choices and make them from a place of confidence and strength in who you are. And if something is telling you that maybe it's not time to pivot, you got to listen to that. But if it is time to pivot, then you also need to listen to that. And you need to do it with strategy, intention, and control. All right. This is the last episode of this season. And I just want to say for this episode specifically, episode 3 and 13 in this season will be really helpful around this topic. So I suggest that you go check those out. Also, share this episode with somebody that you know might be wanting to make a pivot. But before we wrap up completely, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on this journey this season. It's been so exciting to announce the book and really walk you through some of what I'm thinking in terms of that through this season. This has been, I think, one of the most real, honest, and strategy-packed seasons that I have had. And it's because we really focused on the challenges that professionals face day to day. These are very common challenges that I have walked through. We've talked about feeling stuck and questioning your values and being overlooked. Navigating office politics was a big one. Rebuilding after setbacks. And today, in terms of, is it too late to pivot? And it never is. But here's what I want you to take away from this. Career growth is not linear. It never has been. It's messy. It's personal. And you need tools to help you navigate that with clarity and control. So, if this season helped you rethink your approach, validate your experience, or take even one small step, then I have done what I set out to do. Please stay connected. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you are listening to the podcast so that you don't miss any bonus episodes or when next season launches. Please head to the show notes for all the different resources that I have. And if you really want to go deeper with me, get on my email list. I'm going to be sharing more about the book writing journey and then just other tips and tricks to help you with your career. But as I have said before, I'm writing a book based on the Control Your Career process. Hopefully it's coming in 2026 as I continue to keep writing. But it is packed with so much information that I'm so excited to share with you. But again, please get on that email list so that you are up to date on any of the information and updates coming up around that. Thanks again for being here, for listening, and for trusting me to be a part of your career journey. Until next time, go control your career.